Arsenal look to expand the Emirates Stadium, hoping, of course, to bring in more fans to the North London ground. And not only that, but a improvement in revenue. But is it possible? What's the truth behind it? And is that even going to be the final outcome? We're going to delve into the truth of the matter and find out some more about the topic of what might happen to our beloved stadium. This is today's Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you so much as always for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. Hope you're doing good, hope you're doing well, hope your week has been good to you so far. Apologies for the slight lateness, just had to deal with a situation, so appreciate your patience. Good morning to those joining us live in the chat. Good morning to Black Shine, to Matt G, to Arasuki, Grantley Poos. We've got Natty, Tom and James. We've got Tom, Jamil, Oslo, Guna, Claire, Steve. We've got Martin. We've got Paul, Black Shine, Yui. We've got Hattori, Rich and Shari. Good morning to you all, and plenty more of you guys and girls in the chat box also. And I can see already plenty of you with plenty of thoughts, of course, about the current situation regarding the stadium. So we're going to look into that a little bit further in part two with all of you, of course, as well. And of course, delve rather into what is going on in that regard. But we've got a couple of things to talk about before we get to that headline story. First of all, the Arsenal women's team's bad form sadly continues. Their first game of the Women's Champions League group stage was underway yesterday, and they were beaten at home. Alessia Russo gave the Gunners a lead, but 2 goals from Demornay gave Lyon a vital victory in the Champions League group stage, which is obviously a frustration to Rene Slegers. It is now I say group stage, it's kind of the whole similar league phase, if you like, from the men's side of things, and Arsenal sit therefore down in 17th place in the big table of 18 teams that are now involved in the competition. It's a very strange kind of working of the rest of the games that Arsenal have got left to play. They play away to Benfica in October before then going away to Bayern Munich. They've then got Real Madrid after that, FC 20 in their 5th matchday game. And then they've got a match against Oud Hervely Leuven. I believe Belgian sides after that as well. So 6 matches to be played up from the original. Well, it's not even up because you'd be doing home and away 6 games, of course, from the original group phase. But it's now a league phase table like the men's side of the competition as well. But a disappointing result, and of course that comes after defeat to Manchester City at the weekend, and previous to that, draws against Aston Villa and Manchester United. It is not the best start to the campaign after, of course, that brilliant victory in the Champions League last season. I actually spoke to Rene Slegers on the press conference prior to the Manchester City game and asked her about the impact of course, winning the Champions League and being at something of a peak and then having to go back and start again. And, you know, obviously she was defiant in what she was hoping to achieve this season, but already it seems there are some frustrations and almost like I think teams, obviously, with Arsenal having won the competition, you've got a little bit of a target on your back, if you like. And that, of course, gives other teams even more to fight for as well. And they are missing some key players, of course, Leo Williamson among them. David Raya improved his contract. This story was broken yesterday by Sami Mokbel and then furthered by other reporters, including myself. The deal itself was agreed in the summer periods. He didn't renew the deal in terms of an extension of his contract, but you might remember the deal that we had for Leandro Trossard. Trossard, of course, improved the terms of his contract, and this is a similar situation with David Raya, an improvement of their terms, an increase in the player's wage. And I think, you know, it's short-sighted to be like, oh, why would we do that? Why would we not just extend the deal? Why are we just agreeing to pay the players more money? Well, there are very good reasons for this. You look at, first of all, the age of both Trossard and Raya. They're both 30 years of age. They're 2 of our more experienced senior players in the group. And they have deals, especially Raya. Raya's deal keeps him at the club until 2028. So there's not necessarily a pressure to extend that deal. But it sends out a message that you can be rewarded for strong contributions at the club. The club want to improve your terms. They want to show that what you're contributing is valued. And it gives players an incentive, of course, to continue to perform at a high level without necessarily having to agree a contract extension at Arsenal. And David Raya definitely deserves, all of the plaudits. He wouldn't have been on a massive wage having joined from Brentford. It would have been an improved wage. But he is, without a doubt, one of the most key players now in the Arsenal team. Back-to-back Premier League Golden Glove winner over the last 2 seasons. And he's already got 4 clean sheets from 7 matches in the current campaign with the club as well, which is quite the startling achievement, and already seems on his way to yet another Golden Glove trophy. So without a doubt, an improvement of his terms, becoming, of course, perhaps amongst the higher paid players in the group. But if you think about the fact he was probably on and around 100 grand a week prior to this improvement, and Arsenal's top earners are well over £200,000 a week these days, I think obviously with his importance to the team, it was only fair to reflect that in the group as well. I imagine they'll be talking of an extension a little bit later on, but as he gets older, of course, moving into his early 30s and his early to mid 30s, there isn't necessarily as much of a rush from Arsenal's perspective. But the headline story of the day, of course, broke when the Telegraph, Sam Wallace at the Telegraph, among others at the newspaper, breaking a story that Arsenal were considering looking at a 70,000 Emirates Stadium expansion and a potential option to see the new stadium rise to, the biggest Premier League capacity stadium in London, the 3rd biggest stadium in London behind Wembley and Twickenham, of course, but greater than that currently of Tottenham Hotspur's brand new stadium, and far beyond that of the likes of Chelsea, West Ham, and so on and so forth. So it is a big plan if it is true. Now, the situation is, as I understand it, and I wrote my own piece around this with my own information as I rang around some contacts and sources for the rest of the day, is that this idea of a 70,000 seater expansion is purely speculative at the moment. It's just an idea. It's just one of several options. You probably would have remembered a piece written by Isan Khan of the Daily Mail, which talked about the idea of just a few thousand seats expansion at the Emirates Stadium, which is also another option. To make the Emirates Stadium a 70,000 seater, it would require quite the major construction. I mean, you're looking at ripping out all the existing seats. You're looking about changing the angle of the stands and the sides of the stands themselves to make them steeper, and potentially even digging down further and lowering the level of the pitch potentially to fit more seats into the stadium. And of course, a reduction in legroom and seat size, which is already the biggest, I think, in the Premier League, in order to accommodate at least 10,000 more extra seats for the Emirates Stadium. So it would be a major construction that would not just be able to be done over the course of one summer, meaning that Arsenal would need to play their games for an extended period away from the Emirates, which obviously leans into conversations about Wembley. Now, conversations about Wembley have, of course, taken place at the club. It is a well-known fact that if they have to undergo a major construction project, they would have to play their game somewhere else. And Wembley, who housed Tottenham, of course, during those years that White Hart Lane was being demolished and turned into, or rather the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium was being built on the same site, they were playing games at Wembley. Now, I spoke to my colleague and Tottenham Hotspur correspondent, Alistair Gold, yesterday about the idea of what it's like playing at the stadium, to which he said, initially, when I asked him if there was kind of a detrimental impact on form and performance, in addition to further factors perhaps few consider, he says initially it did, because every opponent wanted to play at the National Stadium. It was a day out for them, and they all wanted to perform at their best. Spurs eventually got used to it and picked up some impressive wins there, not least the one against Real Madrid in the Champions League. It was probably one of Mauricio Pochettino's biggest achievements that he managed the nomadic period with 2 more top 4 finishes. Spurs probably learned a lot about what to do and what not to do at their new stadium during their Wembley stint as well, particularly as White Hart Lane had been such a fortress towards the end, and the atmosphere at the National Stadium with the stands further away from the pitch struggled to create a similar noise apart from those big nights. Now, doing a little bit more research into the idea of moving to Wembley, of course, it would be additional travel for a lot of fans. It's also logistically tougher. While at the moment, the Emirates Stadium has access to 3 different tube stations. You've got Arsenal, you've got Holloway Road if you wait long enough after for full-time whistle, and you've also got Highbury and Islington. So you could add Finsbury Park if you wanted to and walk a little bit further away from Arsenal to get to Finsbury Park Station. So 3 or 4 tube stations are available. For Wembley, you've only got Wembley Park Tube Station, which if any of you have ever been to Wembley for several games, you'll know that leaving the ground is particularly challenging. It's not a particularly nice experience. I remember going as a fan to a couple of playoff finals that were played at Wembley for the lower league teams, particularly Charlton, of course, because I've got family connections there, and I'll go along to, wave my flag for the family members who do support them when they're. And it is a nice experience returning from Wembley in those moments. So, yes, it would cause some logistical challenges for the amount of time that fans would need to be there. But it could be a necessary evil if Arsenal want to improve, the capacity of and change the Emirates Stadium for the better. There's a lot of talk about tickets. There's a lot of talk about demand for tickets and for fans to get into the stadium. This would improve things to a degree, but I just don't really see things changing drastically for the ticket situation. Like 10,000 extra seats. If you think about the season ticket waiting list is well beyond 100,000. How many of those tickets are going to be taken up, of course, by the new allocation? It's difficult to know what the benefits outweighing the negatives are for this potential expansion. For me, I think the priority should be on improving the actual infrastructure of the Emirates Stadium, the capacity to get fans in and out of the ground more seamlessly. The seats need updating. The inside, the concourse needs updating. They've done some work to do that, but there are more that is needed inside the Emirates to make it an updated and modern arena, not that it feels like it's just back from 2006. So there is definitely stuff that needs to improve and change about the Emirates, but there is definitely a consciousness that I'm aware of within the club's hierarchy that they want the Emirates to be the main stadium in North London. And there is a pressure, there is a frustration. I think personally, in my honest opinion, there is a bit of a jealousy about the NFL pressure that the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. If you think about the fact our owner owns the LA Rams, and at the moment, NFL games, when they come to North London, are played at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, I can imagine that being something of a little bit of a gripe for them. So, yeah, I think there is a pressure to improve the Emirates Stadium and to make it, again, probably the jewel of just not London, but North London in particular. So, yes. And just on the Wembley thing again, Spurs paid about £15 million a year to basically play at Wembley. Now, they would have made that back, of course, in terms of ticket sales to a degree, but they only were allowed 40,000 tickets, season tickets, I believe, or that were given to those inside the ground. 40,000 tickets were given, and 5,000, I think, were given up to those in the local area at the time. So I don't know if that means that the rest of the tickets then go on sale like they would in terms of the ballot and so on and so forth. I'm not sure, but it would be a massive upheaval plan, and it would take a huge amount of change for this to take place. And obviously Arsenal have already gone through one period of a new stadium being built and moving from Highbury to the new stadium. But they've not gone through a period where their existing stadium needs to change, so that they then need to, of course, take up residency in a stadium like Wembley for such a long period of time. So, yeah, it's a lot. It's exciting to a degree, and knowing that Arsenal could have, potentially an improvements made to the Emirates Stadium. I don't really like the whole AI generation of images because they're not realistic ever. They don't paint the real picture of what it would look like. But it's an intriguing scenario that Arsenal have been looking into for some time. I think over the last 18 months or so, there's been discussions. Of course, now with the changes in the hierarchy, we've seen Otto Mali, of course, join. Obviously, has got his links to real estate. We've seen David Steiner, of course, also join the hierarchy and the board. He too has links to real estate as well. And Otto Mali, I believe, was involved in much of the SoFi Stadium's construction and design and all of that. So there are people with very much detailed expertise now involved in the Arsenal board. So it's by no means a surprise at all to see this. I'm not sure what the London Stadium's capacity is. It says 68,000, so yeah, it would still become the most in terms of Premier League capacity, the greatest capacity of any Premier League ground in the league if Arsenal did go beyond 70,000. So that's all of the kind of the topic of today. So we're going to go and get some of your thoughts now in part 2 right after this. Right, this is part 2 of today's show. We'll be jumping into the chat box and tackling some of your questions. So now is the time to throw them into the chat, and I'll go through as many of them as I can. Mike says, I've read different articles. One suggestion is 80,000. The other suggestion is 70,000. How likely would 80,000 be? It said that they want to follow Madrid's stadium model. Again, the answer is we don't know, Mike. I wish I could tell you that we knew the reality, but the truth is that no one knows, because there isn't a refined decision at this stage. We don't know if it's going to be 70, 65, 80, whatever. Nobody knows the exact plan, because there is no final plan at this stage. There's a lot of different ideas being discussed, and the 70,000 is definitely one of them. But there's loads of different ideas on the table, different options on the table, and the club have not made a decision at this stage as to what's going to take place. Gary says, as long as it doesn't affect investment in the playing squad, I mean, there's always a chance that could happen, because it would be a major investment of the club. But that's why I think Arsenal have looked to invest in the way that they've invested in the squad for now. I mean, Arsenal have an incredibly competitive group of players now. And that group of players that they've got, you think about the best players in that group, they're in their early to mid-20s. Some of them have gone into their mid to late 20s, but even then, you could argue have got many, many years at the top levels still left. So, and they're not going to stop investing, in the lead up to potentially a stadium change or reinvestment or renovation. So Arsenal are in a very different place than they were in 2006 when it was very different. And also the problem with the 2006 redevelopment was, at that time, the sport was a little bit unpredictable. It was much more unpredictable than it is now, because during that time where Arsenal moved from Highbury to the Emirates, I think the mistake the club made is they didn't foresee, you can call it a mistake, you can just call it potentially just being out of the loop on things. They didn't foresee the Chelseas and the Manchester Cities of this world spending in the way that they would spend with their new ownerships in order to become such dominant forces in the league. It's a very different place now, the Premier League. And if Arsenal were to go through a different change, of course, you wouldn't see them restricted in terms of their spending as much as Arsenal were in comparison to their rivals back then. I mean, you look at Tottenham, for instance, they've changed stadiums, but haven't necessarily been restricted too much in their spending and have still remained as competitive as they feasibly could be in the context of Tottenham. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense. Game says, Tom, are you sure it's not 140,000? Imagine going more than double what the current Emirates Stadium is. Imagine that. That would be quite the incredible change. Roy says, Tom, is an increase of 10,000 worth it all for the expense and the upheaval? Surely a minimum of 80,000 might be. Also, can the infrastructure and tubes, etc., handle it as well? And these are all questions that they have to consider. I don't know. I'm not an architect. I'm not a city planner. I don't know if a 10,000 increase would put too much pressure upon the local infrastructure. I don't know. I have absolutely no idea. Is it worth it? Hopefully. But as I said, my priority is the Emirates Stadium infrastructure. That's what I think needs to change drastically for the Emirates. That side of the stadium needs to be significantly improved, but it's still a long way away. It's a long way away, this from happening. It's not going to happen next year. It's not even going to happen in 2027. This is something that it's far down the line and needs to be agreed in really early terms for it to take place. DJ says, isn't some of our issues that Islington Council are not allowing us to host as many events compared to Tottenham's ground? And if they refuse planning, could you see KSE moving us completely? I don't see that, no. I just don't see that at all happening. Would be very difficult to foresee that. James says, why are you not an architect, Tom? Come on, man. Do the research and get that 7-year degree so we can be informed. Yeah, I don't think... I've got a couple of friends who are architects, but I don't think even they'd know necessarily, but they might have a few more ideas than I do. Richard says, Tom, the Emirates infrastructure would improve anyway. Of course it would. But if the expansion's not necessarily worth it, I'd rather they just focused in on the infrastructure itself than a major overhaul. Andy says, morning, Tom. In my opinion, the club's investment in the team and now possibly with a substantial redevelopment of the Emirates just goes to show the ambition that the owners have for Arsenal, and it is exciting. And that's a really good way of looking at it, Andy. You know, there is certainly, I think, with Josh Kroenke's kind of increased attention to Arsenal, involvement with Arsenal over the last 8 years, you can see that he clearly has a real desire for Arsenal to be a success under his watch. I think that's absolutely fair. Mike says, train services are far better now than in 2006. More trains per hour at each of the stations now, and a higher capacity Piccadilly line train coming soon as well. So Mike's in the know about this. Kian says, I'd be devastated if they downgraded my large, wide cushion seat. My aging backside needs all the help it can get. Lee says, Tom, perfect opportunity to put away fans high up with the Seagulls. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? If there was to be a redesign of the bowl itself and the seating level, can they implement a system that puts away fans away from the pitch? That's something I'd be very interested in. I haven't been to the new Everton Stadium yet, but I don't know where away fans sit in the new Everton Stadium. Let me see if I can find a picture of where the where the Everton away fans sit. I've got a family away section. So the away section is kind of like in the corner, but it does seem to still go down to the pitch. So yeah, it does seem to be that there is an away section in the corner, and it does still go down to the pitch. So that seems to be the case with Everton's new ground. Alfie says, Tom, how much would the Emirates as a company be involved in something like this? Would they fund some of the project due to the increased attention and functionality? I mean, that would be very much up to discussions with Emirates. I mean, Emirates are just the stadium and shirt sponsor. They are the sponsor, of the stadium and have the naming rights. I think those naming rights expire in 2028, I think. And I haven't heard anything to suggest that they won't renew necessarily their partnership with Arsenal. The stadium itself, I mean, it's always been called the Emirates Stadium, but isn't it called Ashburton Grove? I think. What is the name? What is the real name of the Emirates Stadium? Yeah, Ashburton Grove. So that's what it would have been called. Just the Arsenal Stadium, which is sometimes in UEFA competitions, it's called the Arsenal Stadium. But I'm pretty sure I thought it was called Ashburton Grove. Is what it was going to be called. But obviously the Emirates Stadium has taken over as the naming right since 2006, which is it's obviously been quite a big high-profile thing. But you think an expansion would encourage them even more so to stay with the club. But Arsenal have one of the best sponsorship deals in the world when it comes to kind of not just shirt sponsors, but the stadium rights as well. Chris says, puts the away fans in the top tier. We're too generous with it. I mean, I think we are, but I don't know what the health and safety kind of limitations are when it comes to that. Rob says, there are major train... Hold on, let's have a look. That's quite a long question. Rob says, there is a solution to expanding the capacity of the Emirates to 100,000. It's to revert back to the terrace model. Do you agree? Is that legally possible? I don't know. Continued, it does not even involve mega expense and inconvenience of expanding the Emirates. Make the North Bank and Clock End standing again. That would massively increase capacity and solve the atmosphere issue. Any fan who has experienced the intensity of Highbury terraces compared to the sterile sitting cinema style of modern stadiums, don't say Hillsborough as an excuse. Modern technology and safe design would make these one-off tragedies something of the past. I mean, Hillsborough obviously is always going to be there as an example of the potential dangers, but it's worth pointing out that I think the Premier League signed off on safe standing a long time ago. I'm pretty sure. Let me see if I can find you the relevant article. Yes, so safe standing areas allowed for the 22-23 season. The government has confirmed Premier League and Championship clubs will be allowed to introduce safe standing areas of football stadiums from the start of the 22-23 season. So there's a number of clubs that have kind of already done it, and some clubs that already have it. Absolutely, the Emirates Stadium in a redesign should be looking at potential safe standing sections. So I look forward to that, because it's definitely something that should be. And some fans can't stand. You have to respect that matters, and so there should be dedicated seating areas inside the stadium. But equally, there should be safe standing designated areas as well. So I think both are absolutely a must. But I don't know how it would affect capacity, because the capacity thing is a little different. I'm pretty sure the safe standing sections of certain stadiums, they're not terraces. They still have seats. So I don't know if that's part of the safety measure of a safe standing section, is that every seat has a dedicated, obviously you have kind of those railings when you have safe standing sections. So I think every single one of those still has a seat attached to it. So I'm not sure if it would increase necessarily the stadium capacity as much as people think that it would. Richard says, Tom, is there not an obligation for away fans to be close to the pitch to maintain atmosphere? I understand St James's Park use a bit of a loophole to keep away fans at the top. I mean, I'm sure there are legislative reasons why fans have to be in certain sections of stadiums, but it always is that question that is asked, how come St James's Park doesn't have to have that, but every other stadium does? Boston says the Cronkies could make it like SoFi, capacity of 70,000, expandable to over 100,000 for major events, and a translucent roof made of the ETFE panels, allowing for sunlight and climate control. Arthur says Harry was brilliant yesterday on Sky Sports, pushing back on Arsenal winning a trophy this season. I haven't seen it. I need to look at it. If it's on, if you can catch a clip of it, let me know where I can see it. I would love to see it. Richard says, Tom, is there not an obligation for away fans to be close to the pitch to maintain atmosphere, etc.? I understand St James's Park uses a loophole. We kind of touched that, didn't we? Yeah, we just did that a second ago. And Chris says, I've been at the back of the top tier and you can still see the game perfectly. Of course, the angle would also change. So even though you'd be higher up, you would technically be closer if the angle was to change as well. Jamie says, I think Newcastle have to pay fines because of their away fan section. Interesting. And Amberley also says that too. Claire says, if a rule is a Premier League rule, just take them to court. City have proven the Premier League rules seem not fit for purpose. Allegedly. Chris says, 8,000 new top tier is perfect. Let's get it done. Kian says the Emirates current seating for all supporters is far superior to any other ground in the Premier League. Size, comfort, and space between each person. I mean, it is the best leg room and size of seat in the Premier League by a long way, but it still, I think, is something that isn't a necessity. It is a little bit up middle class, I think. I don't think stadiums need to have, like the Emirates, comfy, wide seating. I think the seats can be like they are in the majority of grounds, slightly smaller, slightly more robust, and then you can fit more people in the ground. I'm really not, and I like the seats. Like the seats are the same in the press box as well. And if it means sacrificing them, I have absolutely no problem with that, in my opinion, at all. Gary says, in the reports, Arsenal declined to use the stadium for Euro 2028. So it looks like they are aiming for that type of time period. Maybe. Is that a sign? Maybe. Some good detective work there, Gary. James says, Tom, Arsenal are a class club and we should stay that way. I said middle class. There's a difference between being a classy club and a middle class club. That's a different thing entirely, James. Fuad says, Tom, do you think the reason Arsenal decided not to host any of the games for the Euros in 2028 was because of this? Kind of following on from Gary's point, as I don't see a reason why they opted not to host any games and it generates more income. Again, is that a sign? Are people picking up on a bit of a Sherlock Holmes moment and finding the reason as to why? I'm not sure. But it's one sincerely to think about. Let me know your thoughts on the Emirates Stadium capacity expansion in the comment section down below. I'll be back with you, of course, tomorrow morning discussing any more details and any more news, of course. We've got 2 more shows this week before I take a little break over the weekend. So show on Thursday morning, show on Friday morning, and then we'll be back on Monday. Have a fantastic Wednesday. Get through today, and you're nearly at the end of the week, and then we'll be into the next week and heading into brand new Premier League action. So fingers crossed, it'll all be okay. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.